and welcome everyone. I'm Jasmine. I'm a mentor and executive team member at WeLEAP Aerospace. Today we have another wonderful panel session under WeLEAP Expert Insight series. In this series, we invite experts from academia and industry who have established themselves in their field after years of research and industrial experience. We try to learn from their life stories, their career journey, struggles they faced, and how they overcome those. Our goal is to present their stories in front of a wider audience who can relate to them and probably get inspired to achieve higher goals. Today, we have a panel session under the name My Aerospace Journey. Aerospace, as we know, is a highly sensitive field, and it's challenging for international personnel to climb up the professional ladder towards globally renowned organizations such as NASA, Johns Hopkins, US national labs, and other institutions. Since the positions are limited by work visa or citizenship requirements, I'm glad to have three great women on this panel today who came from international backgrounds and made their way to higher education in aerospace engineering, but are also in highly reputed aerospace organizations. Being at these organizations is a dream for many young students and researchers globally. Today's session is meant to give you a glimpse of how these three carved out their aerospace trajectory, and hopefully you can learn and get some motivation from our discussion today. With this, I'll move on to the brief introduction of today's speakers, and we will hear briefly from each speaker and then open the floor for questions. So my name is Jasmine. I'm a PhD student at Aeroastro at MIT. We first have Durgesh Chandel. Durgesh is a software research scientist at Intel Corporation and a research affiliate at MIT Hypersonics Lab. She is also the founder of WeLEAP Aerospace. She completed her PhD in aerospace engineering from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. She's been awarded the Women in Aerospace 2019 award by MIT and is a member of the AIAA Thermophysics Technical Committee and the AIAA Diversity Working Group. Durgesh is from India. Our next panelist is Swati Saxena, research scientist at NASA Ames Research Center and a mentor at WeLEAP Aerospace. She completed her master's and PhD in aerospace engineering from the Penn State University. Swati has 2 patents, 20 plus publications in international journals and conferences, and 25 plus GE internal publications. Swati hails from India. Our third panelist is Samalis Santini De León. She's a preparation for powered flight lead at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab with the entry descent landing team for the Dragonfly mission to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. She is also a member at WeLEAP Aerospace. Samalis obtained her PhD from Texas A&M University and was an NSTRF fellow. She hails from Puerto Rico. Let us now turn to our panelists and kindly request that they share some insights into their journey. We'll start with Durgesh.
Hi, everybody. I'm Durgesh, and I just wanted you to give a glimpse of how I moved throughout my career. So right from undergrad, I started from Indian Institute of Technology, and I was lucky to be able to work in different regimes of the aerospace engineering. So, in the early career, I was working on low speed flows and multi-phase flows, for example, granular flows. I also did my internship at Max Planck Institute in Germany. And then I moved on to industry where I learned and demonstrated skills on turbo machinery design, thermal systems design, and combustor design for GE's commercial aircrafts. This was a very learningful time for me. Then I moved on for my graduate studies. In my PhD, my main focus was on modeling the gas dynamic state during the spacecraft re-entry missions. So for example, when a spacecraft is entering to Earth, coming back from a mission, or when we are trying to go to Mars or Jupiter or any other new planet. So that was, again, a wonderful learning experience. And it also gave me an opportunity to do internship at NASA Ames. After that, I moved on for my postdoctoral research. I came to MIT Aeroastro department. Then I worked with 2 different labs. My first project was with gas turbine lab, and the second one was with hypersonics research lab. Now I am kind of done with my research exploration, and I'm now working as in the industry again at Intel Corporation. So my current role is of a research engineer, where I am developing models using machine learning and AI for the plasma etch processes during the semiconductor manufacturing. Next slide, please. So then just to give you a glimpse of my projects, so my postdoc project at MIT was focused on designing civil aircraft for sustainable aviation, and basically the aircraft powered by hydrogen fuel cells or alternative fuels, so that we can really achieve the zero emission flight. So I'm just showing some results here, but the main thing to take away is that with NASA and with several other universities, we had a joint project under NASA's Cheetah program, and we developed the conceptual design for a civil aircraft which can be powered electrically and leaves zero emissions. And on my current role at Intel, I'm showing a cartoon of how the plasma etch process happens for the etching during the semiconductor manufacturing. So basically, I receive SEM images, the electron microscopy images, and I try to use them to develop my machine learning models. Okay, next slide, please. And just a glimpse of what I did in my PhD. So basically, I was working on a NASA-funded project. So at NASA Ames Research Center in California, they have a unique facility called electric arc shock tube, where they basically generate high-speed atmospheric entry conditions in ground-based experiments. So my goal was to simulate this shock tube facility and predict the gas dynamic behavior during the reentry, so that finally it can help the team which is designing the heat shield systems. So basically we can optimize better and come up with safer missions. So that was my thing. And then, so basically I'm showing some of my research expertise areas, and I am also involved with empowering the community. So I'm a member at AIAA Thermophysics Technical Committee and Diversity Working Group. I have been also involved in the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration Reauthorization Working Groups for the policy making for the aerospace and commercial space programs. And I've been an advocate for AIAA Congressional Visit Days, where I conveyed the key issues in aerospace to the congressional offices. So I enjoy all this kind of, identifying the problem in my field and then trying to find a solution, working with other people. And I'm showing some of my sponsors and partners in my work so far. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Durgesh. We'll move on to our next panelist, Swati, Dr. Swati.
So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm glad, I'm very happy to be, able to attend this session and share my experience and learnings over my career journey, as well as my educational background here. So I did my bachelor's in aerospace engineering from IIT Kanpur, and mostly my the last year project was focused on experimental fluid mechanics. So there is a low speed wind tunnel in IIT Kanpur, where I did all my experiments and came up with a new design and concept for a vertical axis wind turbine. So that gave me really good exposure to different elements of not just setting up those large scale experiments, but also how to validate it with some theoretical data, as well as simulation and modeling. So after completing my bachelor's in India, I came to the US to do my graduate studies, joined Penn State University, and completed my master's and PhD there. My topic of research for both master's and PhD was computational aeroacoustics, and I got the opportunity to work on the projects funded by industry. So Boeing funded my master's project, and Pratt and Whitney funded my PhD project, and that really gave me good exposure to how we work in the industry environment. We used to have regular bi-weekly or monthly tag-ups with them, so really gave me exposure to that culture, to the corporate world. After completing my PhD, I joined as a research engineer at GE Global Research Center in upstate New York. Um, it's a huge facility that's their headquarters for the research facilities that they had all over the world. That has changed over the last few years, but is still the experience I got there, I would say, has been remarkable and very very important aspect of my career, my journey here. So there I got exposure to working with different GE businesses, GE Aviation, GE Power, GE Energy, and worked on developing new designs and concepts for their next generation gas turbine engines. So turbo machinery, aerodynamics, digital twin was an important aspect of our research back then. Turbulence modeling, and also I did a lot of high fidelity simulations for compressors, fan inlets, and so on for the engines. After that, I moved to the West Coast here in 2017, and also worked as adjunct faculty in mechanical engineering department at Santa Clara University here. Taught a couple of courses, which was something I always wanted to do, teach students. So that was a great experience for me as well. And I worked at ANSYS as a technical manager for a few years, where I focused on digital twin applications for aviation industry. I was mainly working with all the large companies in aerospace like Boeing, US Air Force, Lockheed Martin, and so on. So that gave me really like broad exposure on what kind of problems they are working on and how simulation can help them solve their problems. Last year, I joined NASA Ames Research Center, and currently I'm working in air traffic management, a project related to that as a technical lead and also as a acting deputy sub project manager. I'll tell you a bit more about it in the next slide, but that's where where most of my work currently focuses on. So, in next couple of slides, just want to give you a brief glimpse of the research work that I've done in this area. So, as I mentioned during my master's and PhD, I was working on aeroacoustics, and here you can see a couple of snapshots of flow coming out of the jet exhaust at the from the engine jet exhaust, and the graphs that you really see here are the noise spectra that are generated from those jet engines. So figuring out ways to how to reduce that overall noise emission was the focus of my research. So developed a couple of models there, but this is just to show you how intensive these CFD simulations are. Next slide. A couple of other applications in gas turbine, particulate ingestion in engines is a big problem, focused on that, and also ice ingestion in engines that causes a lot of damage to engine hulls. We did high fidelity modeling for that as well. Next slide. So this is the current project that I'm working on at NASA. It's called Digital Information Platform, and the focus is to develop sustainable aviation services and provide a platform where the service providers can host their services to support and optimize the airspace operations in the US. So we have developed a bunch of machine learning based services to optimize the ground operations. We are also now looking into developing flight deck services, and we have the platform development work going on as well. So I know we are short on time, but if you have any questions about any of these research topics, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swati. Let's move on to our third panelist, Samalis.
Hi. It looks like some of the text didn't make it in, but no worries. I am Samalis Santini. I am originally from Puerto Rico, so first language Spanish, had to learn a few languages moving around, but I enjoy that a lot. And in Puerto Rico, I studied mechanical engineering. I did a lot of internships throughout my undergraduate degree, some at NASA, some at MIT, and some in private industry, which really gave me a very broad background. I did things like rotorcraft aeromechanics, heat transfer, all over the place. But ultimately, all of that led me to pursue a career in aerospace engineering. And that's when I went up to the US North. I went to New York, to Cornell, to do my originally PhD in aerospace engineering. And during my PhD, I specialized in intelligent data understanding for planetary entry, descent, and landing systems. So what I was doing was figuring ways to use artificial intelligence, knowledge extraction tools, and cognitive assistance to extract valuable information from entry, descent, and landing simulations. This is entry, descent, and landing is fraught with uncertainties. It's a very complex system when we're entering the atmosphere. And part of that was, how do we extract information from these complex simulations where you get more than 15,000 variables? How do you get really, truly valuable information aside from just the statistics? So during that time, I was funded through NSGRF, who have changed names now, but at the time I was a NASA Science and Technology Research Fellowship. And I started working closely with folks at NASA Langley and at JPL, and I got involved with the Mars 2020 mission. So I was supporting the team with analyzing case studies for Mars landing, but then I was also using a lot of these data sets for my research projects. During that time, I ended up going to Texas because life happens and my advisor moved, so I moved along, and while I was in Texas finishing my PhD, I ended up a lot of the time in the West Coast at JPL getting ready for the Perseverance landing. So I always joke, I draw my little map and I always say I took a little detour to Mars at the time, and then came back to real life to continue my graduate studies. So that's a long story short of my background. Right now, I finished my PhD about a year and a half ago, and I joined the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. And I'm now working on the Dragonfly mission, which will be very exciting. And we just had a very big milestone. So I'm really excited to be looking at that. And in Johns Hopkins, I'm the preparation for powered flight lead for the EDL system. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So one of the big questions, a lot of people don't know about Dragonfly. You can go online and look it up. It's a lot of information is coming up. There are a few research papers on it, but ultimately, Dragonfly is a New Frontiers mission that will investigate the habitability of Titan's environment, and it'll look for prebiotic chemistry. It is a very interesting place. Titan is a moon that has an atmosphere, which is not really known of. So this is a very, very interesting project. And it's in the background, that's just a little diagram of what the EDL sequence is looking like. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about that. All right. So one of the other questions that come up is, why are we going to Titan beyond the science, and why land? And a lot of it is Titan is actually easier to land than in Mars, in the sense that the atmosphere is much thicker. So you don't have 7 minutes of terror when you land on Titan. So you have lower gravity, you have higher atmospheric density. So this works to our favor, and this also gives us greater capabilities to actually fly on the surface of Titan. So there's the joke going around, instead of 7 minutes of terror, you call it 2 hours of discomfort as you descend through the atmosphere. So it's a very interesting place. It's also extremely cold. So landing on Titan, operating on Titan is also fraught with challenges. So this is we're just got through the major preliminary design review, which I'll speak in a minute, but there's, I couldn't really show much of what the EDL sequence is looking like for landing on Titan, but how we're landing on Titan is pretty similar to how landing on Mars has been done, in the sense that on the corner back to the left, you use a parachute system to decelerate as we enter through the atmosphere. Before that, we do a ballistic entry once the conditions are right, a drogue parachute is deployed and it goes down for 90 minutes. And then we have another main parachute deployed to allow us to descend slowly on Titan. This mission is a little bit different in the sense that normally entry, descent, and landing ends when you touch the surface. For Dragonfly, entry, descent, and landing, you kind of have entry and descent, because at some point the lander is going to be separated and it's actually going to do its own flight to land on the surface. So it's and unlike other missions, the lander is also playing a role through some parts of the entry, descent, and landing sequence. And what I mean by that is that the lander is actually going to be using its rotors to control the roll rate, the spin rate of the capsule as it descends. So this is a very interesting project with many organizations involved. My role as preparation for powered flight systems engineer is to make sure that when we release the lander to do its first flight and land on Titan, we're doing it under the right conditions. So this is very difficult. You can't just throw a rotorcraft and expect it's going to fly. It's a very limited performance envelope in which we can land. So part of my job is to make sure that we're doing so, and we're conscious and aware and mitigating any risk that we have when we do so. And I just put down there a little link and QR code. We just had Dragonfly pass its preliminary design review a few weeks ago. So now the mission is moving forward to the next phase, which is the critical design review. And it's moving forward, and it's going to be a very interesting project. So stay tuned for more news on that moving forward. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Samalis. Now we'll move on to the next session, which is the question and answer segment of today's talk. I have a list of questions which are general, but I also encourage the audience members to pose your questions, type them out in the chat, or raise your hand if you want to unmute and speak directly to the panelists. So I'll start with the first question. This is a very general question. I know some of you have also answered it during your presentation, but what inspired you to pursue aerospace, and what specific path led you to your current or previous positions? I would say we could break down to just the first question. What inspired you to pursue aerospace? And I'll start with Durgesh.
Okay, sure. So aerospace engineering, as of many other kids in India, I grew up watching Discovery Channel and watching all these space documentaries. And I was highly fascinated with the fact that, yeah, people can go to space, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And when I was doing my 10th standard or sometime around that, the news of Kalpana Chawla and Columbia space shuttle disaster came out. And then it gave me strong motivation because I always used to think that I live in India. How can I ever be involved with something like NASA? And that time, of course, the Indian Space Research Organization was there, but it was not doing a lot of projects. So, people did not know about it. We knew about NASA, but not about ISRO that much. So, Kalpana Chawla's story gave me some motivation that, yeah, even if I'm from India, maybe I can dream about being in aerospace. But also I was taken aback on the fact that being an astronaut is really risky. So then I was like, okay, maybe I can work on something which tries to save them and make these missions, more feasible and safe and optimized. So then I think it was lucky for me that right from the beginning, I had this clarity in my mind that I want to go for higher studies all the way up to PhD in aerospace engineering, and then try to work for NASA. And then, yeah, I kept moving in that direction. It was not that easy because aerospace engineering was not that mainstream in India in terms of getting jobs. And also there were very few girls taking this stream. So of course I had to face a lot of struggle and opposition from my, relatives and colleagues and everybody, but thankfully everything worked, and I am here. So, yeah.
Well, that was really fascinating to hear about your inspiration. Thank you, Durgesh, for sharing. I'll ask Dr. Swati to share your inspiration or what inspired you to pursue aerospace.
Yeah, sure. So it's very interesting actually. So I was as a child, I was very interested in astronomy and not really aerospace engineering, and to used every opportunity to learn about the planets, solar system, stars, and so on, through like reading books and the science books that were available back then in India, and using the stargazing opportunities and so on. So there was a science magazine that we used to get every month in our home, called Science Reporter. So they had like very interesting articles, and I used to read it, every month, all the articles. And they also published articles on aerospace engineering, especially how NASA technologies. I still remember reading that article, how NASA developed technologies that were initially developed for astronauts and for these space missions. Now they are used in our daily everyday lives. So how that transition happened, and so that really fascinated me, and slowly I started to develop interest in this field. And then fortunately I got the opportunity to do my undergraduate studies in aerospace engineering from IIT Kanpur, which I would say is the one of the best, if not best, place to do a undergraduate degree in this particular field, because they have the best facilities and so on for aerospace engineers in the country. So that gave me a lot of interest, and also gave me exposure on what more I can do in this field. And then fortunately I was able to continue my journey by doing masters and PhD in this area. And then the next big milestone, I would say, what was the opportunity to work at GE, and that get more exposure to commercial aviation and what the challenges are and so on. So this, I would say, like one thing led to the other, and just my initial interest in space and astronomy like kept me going, and yeah, in this field.
All right, thank you for sharing, Dr. Swati. Let's move on to Samalis.
Yeah. So growing up, I was always fascinated by space. I had all of my books, I had everything, but that's all about, that's all I knew at the time. So I was pretty fortunate that in high school, NASA was getting more engaged in Puerto Rico through space grant developing programs. And they actually, for my school, had the VEX robotics program. And I decided I was not sure if I wanted to be an engineer or a scientist, so I joined. And being part of that program, it was very helpful because NASA was at the time doing a lot of presentations for us, the kids, on what are we doing for space travel. And that really opened my eyes. There's still, we have all of these cool things, planets, stars, a lot of mysteries, but there are things we can do right now in just a few years. So that really sparked my interest. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at the time, but I said I want to do aerospace. But in Puerto Rico at the time, there was no degree in aerospace engineering. I think recently there's only minors. So mechanical engineering was the closest thing I could do. And at the time, I thought I wanted to do robotics for space. I'm not doing that anymore, but that's what I wanted to do at the time. So I pursued my path in mechanical engineering, but I knew I wanted to do research even from the first year in college. I was desperate looking for fellowships, any research that could be remotely close to space. And I was lucky to find a program called RockSat-X, which was sponsored also by NASA Space Grant, in which university teams in Puerto Rico and in the US would build experimental payloads to launch in suborbital flight. And once I found out about that, I volunteered. I went to the professor leading that. How can I get involved? I had nothing. I was a freshman. I was learning how to do CAD modeling. So it was very exciting. But I volunteered, and just from volunteering, I was already learning so much to the point where I stayed on that project. And in the future, I was funded to continue working on that project and be able to pay for my studies. So I continued doing that. I did a little bit of research I applied for NASA internships. I got rejected many times, but I also kept applying, kept looking for different opportunities. I was successful then, and that really, between doing that and trying other non-aerospace project, I realized this is what I want to do. And that really drove me to apply for graduate school in the aerospace field and finally get to study what I wanted. And then, yeah, in my first year, even though I, really knew I wanted to do aerospace, I was still not sure what exactly. I did so many things in aerospace or in my college undergraduate that I wasn't sure. But talking a lot with my advisor, he had the idea, why don't you just apply to this fellowship? It's a really good graduate fellowship. And the entry, descent, and landing field is a small community we could use. I think you could provide some good research there. And yeah, and I was fortunate enough to have a great advisor. We worked on a proposal and I got engaged with NASA. I worked throughout my graduate studies with them, and that really opened my eyes on, what are the challenges and how can I can contribute to the entry, descent, and landing field further. And I loved it so much, being hands-on, working firsthand with a mission. That's what I wanted to do. And after when I was finishing graduate school, I was determined to find an opportunity that put me there, and I found that with Dragonfly in this case.
All right, thank you for sharing. We have another question. As an international woman in aerospace, what were some of the unique challenges you faced and how did you overcome them? And I'd open this question to all.
So maybe I can start. So as a woman, especially in this field of engineering in general, one of the challenges has been that there are usually very few women in the room. Whether it's a classroom or you are in the corporate environment or in the research organization, and sometimes you are just like you are the only woman in the room. That itself poses some challenges, but I would like to say that I don't think, at least for my in my personal experience, it has not been a barrier. I have seen that at the end of the day, people acknowledge your work, and you get the respect if they like if you are working hard, if they like what you're doing, and so on. So I would say that it is a challenge in terms of that you are working in a field where it's mostly male dominated. um, as a international student, though, I would say that there is always this challenge of finding the right opportunity in this field because of the citizenship requirement, right? As most of you are already familiar with, most of the positions need at least permanent resident or citizenship requirement. But other than that, but I would say, like, there's still few opportunities or few companies that would hire international students, and then you can eventually apply for permanent residency and so on. So as an international woman student, I would say just look for those opportunities and talk to people, network, and get as much information as you can. There are always new opportunities coming up for international students as well.
Thank you for sharing.
I think I can add to this. So I agree with everything what Swati said. And yeah, like if you're coming from a minority group, that itself is a challenge. And then, of course, even if you have all the skills required for a job, if you do not have the citizenship, you do not meet the eligibility criteria and you cannot apply. So, of course, it's it's something which cannot be changed. So the best strategy is to plan your undergrad and graduate research accordingly. And of course, the permanent positions or full-time positions require citizenship, but there are internships at NASA, for example, which are open for internationals and do not require, like if you're in a student visa, you can apply for them. So that's how I got an opportunity to work at NASA. And of course, being a full-time there is still a challenge for me because I do not have a green card yet or the citizenship yet. And it's a long process. Like even if you know all this, coming from India or China, like we have 10 to 12 years of backlog in the normal green card category. So you have to, shoot high for getting into EB1 category, which is the extraordinary category where you mainly compete with like professors or very top level researchers in the whole country. So it's a whole different ball game. But some tips can be that choose your PhD project such that you can collaborate with more people. And if it is more for like, so for example, my PhD project was very specific. It was for a particular NASA facility and I was trying to simulate that. But then there are projects which are more on general topics like modeling something or coming up with a numerical algorithm which can be applied in several cases. So some of my colleagues did that and they were able to publish more and collaborate more and have a better profile for EB1 category. And that's how they were able to get into NASA and other highly reputed institutions where citizenship was required. So these are the ways you can accelerate the process. But of course, being international, this is something which always stays in your mind whenever you are trying to choose for any project or apply for any job. I'm curious to learn how it was for Samalis. So Samalis, would you like to share?
Yeah, so I think I guess I can say I'm lucky that in the sense because Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, I have citizenship. So I took advantage of that, and I know secondhand from my husband all of the struggles as a foreigner to get a green card. So I think I definitely, even as a U.S. citizen and having that advantage, our fields can be very narrow. That is, I agree. And even for me, it was very difficult to find a position within NASA, even in the commercial sector, that I thought would be a good fit. So I think it's important to broaden your horizons a little bit, be open to different opportunities, because sometimes you don't find initially what you want, but it doesn't mean you're never going to end up in that path again. So at some point, I got, again, very fortunate that I found Dragonfly, but I was going to end up deviating into different areas in aerospace, kind of start dipping the toes in other projects related to my work in systems architecting and artificial intelligence. But I think it's important to, broaden your horizons, be open to new opportunities and ideas, especially in this field. So I think trying different things, even while you're working on your specialty, is very beneficial. It will give you a separate, side skill set that you could use. Hope that helps a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great detail.
Yeah, that was really insightful. Thank you for sharing, all of you. Yes. Okay, I'll move on to the next question that is something that I personally like. What was your most memorable experience or crucial milestone during your path to your current position? And again, I'll open this to the floor.
I think so. I think my biggest milestone was being a part of the landing team during the day of landing operations. All of that was extremely, extremely grateful for me. So seeing firsthand all of the work you put into a project, seeing it executed and being successful was something really, really, for me, important and life-changing. And kind of, as a grad student, many of it's very, it can get dark, it can get very frustrating. But being involved in something where you have an impact is something that is gratifying, and for me, what kept me moving forward in those moments of doubt. So I think seeing the impact of what you do with something, regardless of the type of work you do, was something really, really important.
And maybe I can, for me, it was again going back to the first corporate job that I did at GE Research was a crucial milestone, I would say, because as we discussed previously, it is very challenging for international students to get full-time opportunities in the field of aerospace engineering, and GE Research is one of the few places who hire international students. If you are doing a PhD, they would sponsor for your work visa. So and I got that opportunity. So that, I would say, is the crucial milestone in my path. In my career journey here, I was able to continue working in aviation, in commercial aviation, and again learn a lot when I was there. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
I would also share my experience. So for me, as I told earlier, going to NASA was my dream. And when I started my PhD, I had it in my mind that, I wanted to work on something related to NASA and then publish some good stuff and, kind of be prepared to apply for NASA jobs. And thankfully, it occurred in a way that I got opportunity to do internships there. And when I was actually there, I was there for 2 summers. So it was really wonderful to be actually sitting with other NASA engineers and being able to discuss the details of all these missions, which, I was always fascinated about. And I know so many of international people like in the whole world are fascinated on. So, and the other thing was it also gave me a lot of confidence. Like, throughout my career, I have seen like when I was growing up, the conditioning was totally different. Like you are a girl, you should not be speaking that much, things like that. And as I kept proceeding, I found that, like in order to voice your opinion, you have to first of all know things and then have enough courage to, share them with others. And, I was very afraid of asking questions. I was always thinking maybe it's a stupid question or maybe it will waste time for other people. Maybe I should ask it later on to the speaker one-on-one. So things like that. And I've been working on all those throughout my career. So being at NASA also gave me some confidence because like once you go to a level where you gain certain level of credibility with your work, then you stop feeling those hesitations, and then you feel like, okay, I know something and I can share that. So that really helped me and also inspired me to apply for the postdoc program at MIT. Before coming to MIT, I used to think, oh, MIT is like world's #1 institution. I am not even, worthy of applying there, things like that. But then my PhD project turns out in a way that I was able to solve a problem which NASA and other scientists were trying to solve from past 10 years. So that definitely gave me a boost. And, I could think that maybe I should at least apply for the postdoc program. And I'm glad that I did. And I'm mentioning this because, so many of us, especially people coming from developing countries or who are first generation students or coming from minority, they are kind of like the first person in their whole family. They have not seen professors or researchers in their daily life that often. So it seems like maybe this is a totally different breed of people who does this kind of work. And so I'm mentioning this so that we all know that everybody doing this top-notch research is also a normal human being like us. And if we just try and focus and keep giving our best efforts, and of course it's I will say it's little bit of like you being at right time at the right place as well. So many things have to align well for you to succeed. So always be thankful for all the mentors and everybody you come across. And I would also suggest that please also keep helping people in your cohort and everybody in whatever way you can. So yeah.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Durgesh. That leads us very well into our next question, which is, what are some of your who are some of your role models or mentors, and what did you learn from them?
Maybe I can share my thoughts here. So in terms of the role model, I would say from the very beginning, my first role model was my father. He was now I actually did not appreciate it back then because I thought it's like, okay, it's very normal because it was happening in my house. But he was very very progressive, given like decades back in India, giving so much importance to the education for your girl child is something that now I see the value of it. So he would say it was just his progressive thinking was something I'm really appreciative of. um, my grandmother, I just learned how just compassionate is so important to like just loving and caring, just it's very important even in our professional journey. As Durgesh pointed out, like we are all human beings, and at certain level outside work, we are all just living a similar life and have similar problems. So just being compassionate and caring and loving is so important. Then some of my teachers in back in IIT Kanpur, now they were really my role model, because they were just doing that work because they were so passionate about it. It was not for money, it was not for anything else, but they were just doing it because they were so passionate about that, about the work they were doing. So that was something definitely that touched me. Just one book I would just last point I would like to mention. I read autobiography of one of the presidents of India, APJ Abdul Kalam, and he was a space scientist as well. He was took India's missile and space program to another level, and it was that book itself was so inspiring, and at different levels, it doesn't matter if you are in this field or not, but how do you should uh, have those, how he overcame the hardships, the barriers he faced, and how he was able to get where he could, from coming from a very humble background. So I would say, like, he was also kind of a, in the spirit, was like a role model for me. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much for sharing. Yes, the people you mentioned are very inspirational as well.
I'll let Samalis go next because she has to leave soon.
Oh, sure, no worries. Yeah, I think for me, my parents also were someone very inspirational. Growing up, we had very limited means financially, so but I was a swimmer growing up, and it was a very demanding sport, and I wanted to swim, and my parents did everything they could in their power to take me to everyday swim practice. We sometimes didn't have money for gas, things like that, and finding a way for me to continue to pursue all the dreams and finding always solutions to very difficult, constrained situations was inspiring. And then as I got older, I wanted to go to a good math and science school, and that was also hard. It was far away from where we lived, so there were many sacrifices that were done for me to get where I was, and I'm super appreciative, to say the least, of that. I'm always very happy when I do all of these accomplishments. I know perseverance. I learned that from them, and that's something extremely, yeah, it was inspiring to me also. They're doing this and they did their best growing up. We were still limited, but that was just, yeah, extremely inspiring. And also here in Puerto Rico, we have a news and meteorologist, actually. I saw her always growing up on TV, and she has done so much for the community. She's always creating, she's still to this day, she even created a museum for kids, and she was doing all of this science outreach to spread science and engineering to Puerto Rico, where education, we're struggling right now, and seeing all of the effort that's being put by her. I had the chance to talk to her on TV when I did the project, and I was, so inspired. I still continue to be inspired by her. So just doing all of this for the community is just great, and I'd like to do that in the future, like give as much as I can to the community.
Thank you so much for sharing. I feel like we have two questions in the chat. Durgesh, do you want to answer, or should we go for the questions in the chat?
Yeah, I can hold my answer because I will let Vinodini ask her question so that Samalis and Swati can respond, and I can stay for longer.
Vinodini, should I ask I might read the question to save time. Is it easier applying to internships at academic and research labs compared to the industry as an international student? And the second part is a postdoc crucial to transitioning to the industry after your PhD?
I think Swati can
So
talk about
yeah.
international.
Yeah, the first one probably I can take. Yeah. So, in my experience, yes, that's sometimes that's the case. It's easier to get an internship opportunity at an academic or research organization as an international student, because they most of the time they usually have those kind of programs well structured where they are open to having international students. In industry, I'm not saying it's not possible, but for such a short duration, they may or may not want to get into the visa and all those formalities. So it depends. If you are able to connect with someone who is looking to hire have a student with your experience, and they are willing to take that responsibility of getting the visa sponsored and all of that, then it's possible. But yeah, in general, in my experience, it's easier to get a internship at academic or institution.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
I can answer the
Maybe,
second part of the
yeah.
question. I don't think a postdoc is crucial to a career, and at least in industry. I think what's really helpful ultimately is your skill set, and if you have a good skill set, that's what's going to get you the position. I think postdoc tends to be more associated traditionally for academic positions in academia for professors. I don't think for industry, really, maybe some very specific positions in industry do require that, but in my experience overall, it's not crucial. It doesn't hurt if you have it, but it's also not necessary.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add to that, postdoc is usually people go for the postdoc when they are considering both academia and industry, and they want some more time to, decide about and assess their qualifications and stand on what they like more. And usually, an average postdoc is about 2 to 3 years. So you get some time to establish yourself as an independent researcher, and then you can assess if academia is better or industry is better. And
Okay, thank you.
first part, like I agree with what Swati said. So most of my colleagues have been applying accordingly, because in academia, it's very easy to get academic H-1B visa. So even if you apply for like internships so I will say internships are kind of equal, because you have STEM CPT thing on your student visa. So that there they don't have to sponsor you anything extra. But if you're looking for full-time job opportunities, it is relatively easier to go for academia versus industry as an international researcher. And also, if you go right after your PhD, international people have 3 years of STEM OPT total. So if you're a fresh PhD, you are a better candidate for companies to hire you, rather than if you did postdoc and you wasted those 3 years of OPT. So now they have to, sponsor your visa first. So these are some things to keep in mind.
All right. Thank you, Durgesh. I think we are out of time, so I'll just say the conclusion, and then maybe Durgesh, you can stick around and answer some more questions if they come up in the chat.
Yep, sure.
All right. Thank you all for your thoughtful contributions and engagement throughout the session. It has been a pleasure to know about your life stories and discuss these important topics with you, especially to me personally, as well as many members in the audience, being international students in aerospace. We hope that this session was informative and beneficial for everyone involved. And with that, I'd like to end the session. Thank you once again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Durgesh, you're here. So
Yeah, I
shall
think
I?
I can stay for 2-3 more minutes. And there was a question about mentors, like the importance
Yes.
of mentors, which I did not answer. So I just
Yes.
wanted to make a comment about it. Like, of course, I was happy with the fact that both other speakers mentioned the importance of everybody in their life. It was
Yes.
not only teachers or mentors, it's also
Yes.
family members. And for me, it's the same. Like, my mom was my first role model. She did not get an opportunity to go to school coming from a rural background, but she was determined to let me fulfill my dreams, and she stood up for me when everybody else was opposing, and they were saying, what would a girl do in a male dominated field? Why are you wasting money on her? She would not succeed, things like that. So
Yes.
she had supported me really strongly. And even after that, everybody involved, like even my 10th grade teacher, my 6th grade teacher, everybody kept motivating me. Like, for example, I was topping in my exams and other stuff, but that time I did not know much about aerospace engineering, and I simply wanted to be a primary school teacher. So, they will just ask me, Durgesh, what do you want to become later on in life? And I'll be like, oh yeah, I want to be a teacher like you. So they're like, no, there are so many other job opportunities, there are so many other career options, you should go to a bigger school and go to a, expose yourself to several opportunities. So that also gave me strength to come out of my safe zone or comfort zone and then taking risks. And as I kept going forward, I was lucky enough to have highly dedicated PhD advisors and mentors who themselves were like really hardworking. And my PhD advisor, Professor Graham Candler, he was working like 24/7, such an inspiration. And even my advisor at MIT, Professor Edward Greitzer, he is very enthusiastic about his work, and he is now in his 80s, but is still such a big inspiration for everybody. So yeah, so it's like, if you are a good receiver, you can receive inspiration from anywhere. And if you have decided that you are going to do something, then no matter how many people are opposing you, and of course it puts an additional pressure on you, I don't deny that, I have felt a lot of pressure, but still, like, I had some belief in me that no matter what happens, I am going to give it my best shot. If I succeed, it's good. If I fail, okay, everybody will laugh at me, but at least, at least I will not regret. So I would just want everybody to leave with at least one message today, that whatever you feel like doing, please live with no regrets. Like, give your best shot. Even if you fail, at least for the whole life, you will live with a feeling of satisfaction that you tried. And never, never be afraid to have bigger dreams, because you never know how capable you are.
Yes, thank you, Durgesh. That's a very important and very crucial point that you raised there. Thank you so much for answering that question and staying back for a bit as well.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for moderating the session, Jasmine. You have been a wonderful host. And
Thank you.
I'm lucky that we have this dedicated team at WeLEAP. And thanks to all participants for joining us today. We will see you again soon in our next session.
Thank you all.
Bye.